In the last episode, Roman took all the talkers from the edge of hell to Elura, but halfway there, he locked them up. The talkers were thus left to swelter under the sun. Murphy begs Roman for some biscuits or the talkers will soon go berserk. Roman, utterly indifferent, declared them mere livestock, their lives or deaths of no consequence in his eyes. He then ordered the talkers to be herded into a bus. As Murphy was the last to board, he sensed something was amiss. The next second, the guards closed the door, and the talkers went into a frenzy. Witnessing this, Murphy activated his telekinesis. Then, Murphy took the driver's seat and gave Addie, who was ambushed on a hilltop, a signal. It seemed these guards wouldn't last long. On the other hand, Roberta and her team, in disguise, arrived at Elura. As they were about to pass through security, the person in front of them was scanned, identified as a traitor, and immediately had their head blown off by the guards. Terrified but determined to stop Roman, they braved forward. Thanks to Kaya remotely modifying their identities, Citizen Z managed to pass through. George also smoothly cleared the security checkpoint, but trouble struck with Roberta. A network delay on Kaya's end prevented the modification of her information. Was she about to be exposed? Roberta asked the guard to try again. Luckily, Kaya's network issues resolved just in time for Roberta to pass the security checkpoint unscathed. They then hid in a corner to change clothes and planned to split up. Citizen Z went to find Kaya, while Roberta and George set out to find Roman but were recognized by guards en route. Upon seeing this, Roberta and George immediately turned to flee. Roberta knocked out the guards encircling them with a single punch. Unexpectedly, the guards behind them opened fire, taunting if they could outrun bullets. Faced with no choice, Roberta and George surrendered to the armed guards. Meanwhile, Citizen Z searched the building for Kaya. Surprised by her exceedingly well-hidden location,
Come to Mama.
Hey, babe.
the scene shifts back to where the talkers were held. Pandora arrived to find guards' bodies everywhere. Upon reaching the vehicle, she discovered the talkers had vanished. Just then, Murphy appeared.
Wow. Hello. Loved you in Phantom of the Apocalypse.
Pandora questioned him about the events that occurred. Murphy, feigning confusion, claimed he had just fainted and knew nothing. Sensing his evasion, Pandora drew a knife, demanding a serious answer from Murphy.
I don't know, they ran off north by northwest? What? Or is that east by east-west? I don't know.
Realizing Murphy was stalling, Pandora prepared to force a confession, but he remained silent. Just then, Pandora received a call from Roman. She smiled knowingly and then ordered the guards to release Murphy, indicating that George and Roberta had already been arrested in Elura, so he was no longer of any use. Pandora then joined Roman, who was visibly panicked, fearing George's infiltration had a purpose. Upon hearing this, Pandora assured Roman not to worry, taking on the task of interrogating George herself. Immediately after, she and Roman became affectionate with each other again. Elsewhere, Doc and 10K, following the plan, arrived at the outskirts of Pacifica, quickly setting up a tent, plotting something unknown. Back to Roberta, she and George were bound before Roman. Upon confronting Roman, George immediately launched into a tirade, berating him for deceiving her for so long. Then, she began to question Roman about what he found so objectionable about the new America. Roman argued that humans were the rightful rulers of the world, and talkers, being no more than walking corpses, didn't deserve equal treatment with humans. He then ordered his men to isolate Roberta for Pandora to interrogate George. Roman didn't torture Roberta. Instead, he sincerely hoped she would join them. Having heard of her heroic deeds in Zona, such talent was rare. Roberta, unimpressed, retorted that he was even worse than the scum of Zona. Seeing her defiance, Roman had her locked in solitary confinement. Meanwhile, Pandora had beaten George to a pulp but failed to extract any valuable information.
Do this for as long as it takes.
Ditto.
At this time, Sun Mei and the lab used Murphy's blood to extract a vaccine, an uncountable attempt by now. Given Murphy's body contained various vaccines, which could backfire, she decided to experiment on a zombie's hand. Sun Mei injected the newly developed virus vaccine into the hands of zombies, and then Red released the zombie's hand. They anxiously awaited the drug's effect. In the next second, the zombie's hand began to twitch violently, and after a few seconds, the skin of the zombie's hand returned to normal, and it even calmed down gradually. It seems that the vaccine in Murphy's blood cured the zombie virus. After 8 years, the vaccine for curing zombies was finally developed.
The cure.
Meanwhile, Kaya found the solitary confinement room holding Roberta through monitoring, and then she quickly destroyed the door system to release Roberta. Following that, Citizen Z decided to gather with Roberta to rescue George. George is already in big trouble, and Pandora is on the verge of killing her. Despite being stabbed, George remained defiant. Then, Pandora started to have her deranged zombies torture George for information.
Who wants to eat the picked up and rotten, disgusting traitor?
Under the dual pressures of physical and mental attack, George completely succumbed, and then Pandora took control of the zombies, forcing George to divulge all her plans. The scene switches back to Sun Mei, who, along with Red, quickly packed up to escape so the vaccine wouldn't fall into Roman's hands. Red left first to hijack a car to leave the place, while Sun Mei continued to organize the vaccines. But just then, Roman suddenly burst in. To avoid exposing herself, Sun Mei lied, claiming she was tidying up the lab. Suddenly, a drone rose from a cabinet, and Sun Mei realized that Roman had been monitoring her all along. Roman then pulled out a gun and made Sun Mei sit down, subsequently tying her to a surgical chair. Roman then took out the vaccine for the zombies and injected it into Sun Mei's body to force her to give up the vaccine to cure the zombies. But Sun Mei refused to do so. Just then, a guard came by to report Roberta's escape. Angered and frustrated, Roman left Sun Mei there and went to search for Roberta's trail. After coming out, Roman happened to encounter Pandora. Hearing that George had divulged the entire plan, Roman sighed in relief. Learning that the talkers were all at Pacifica, Roman decided to dispatch all the guards from the base.
Where's George?
Well, she and Pierre, well, they're having a little snack.
It seems that Pandora has no integrity at all. She puts George in a cell with the zombies. George, with his hands and feet tied, struggled to deal with the freak zombie. On the other hand, Red found the car and returned to the lab intending to pick up Sun Mei. But by then, Sun Mei had already turned into a zombie. Red immediately searched for the antidote to the zombie's virus that she had just developed. But just as she found the antidote, Sun Mei broke free from her bonds and then pounced on Red to the ground. In the nick of time, Red managed to inject the vaccine into Sun Mei's neck. And quickly, the drug took effect, turning Sun Mei back into a human. Just as they were celebrating, Red discovered a scalpel stabbed into Sun Mei's abdomen. Meanwhile, the rescued talkers were arming themselves, preparing to unite and overthrow Roman's rule. Just then, Murphy arrived, stating everything was ready and now they were just waiting for the enemy to fall into the trap. Following Murphy's passionate speech, the talkers' morale greatly boosted.
If you want it. But you're gonna have to take it.
We're gonna be there with you. Arm up!
On the other side, Citizen Z and Roberta, after regrouping, arrived at the place holding George. After Kaya destroyed the door system, they entered the room to find George lying on the ground, alive or dead unknown. Roberta quickly approached shouting for George, who turned out to have just fainted from exhaustion, having dealt with the zombie herself. Then, they set off again to the lab where Sun Mei was, but by then, Sun Mei had lost too much blood and was near death. With her last breath, Sun Mei mentioned that the knowledge to create a zombie vaccine antidote was in her brain. Then she asked Roberta to take her brain out and give it to Murphy, who would then know what to do. Although everyone is very upset, but there is nothing they can do now. By the time Roman arrived, Sun Mei's brain had already been removed. Seeing Roman's anger, Pandora decided to cool him down. Completely indifferent to Sun Mei's death, Doc followed the plan and turned on the speakers inside the tent. Just then, the guards sent by Roman arrived, spotting the tent set up in advance, and reported back to Roman. Roman, thrilled by the news, ordered the annihilation of all talkers. The guards then launched an attack, firing a barrage at the tent. But when they got closer, the guards realized something was wrong. When they lifted the tent, they realized there were no talkers at all. Following the sound, the guards entered another tent, only to discover that everything was a one-man show staged by Doc. The guards then contacted Roman via walkie-talkie, reporting that the scene contained only an old man and no sign of talkers. Furious, Roman demanded the guards extract the whereabouts of the talkers from him, by any means necessary. Following orders, one guard pressed a handgun to Doc's head. Just as the interrogation began, blood splattered on his face. His comrades had been sniped. It was 10K, who lay in ambush from a distance. Who did it? Later, 10K aimed once again at the hearts of several guards and shot them down. In an instant, those guards were shot, mutated into talkers, and began attacking indiscriminately, overpowering the remaining guards. Doc seized the opportunity to escape. Screams from the scene transmitted through the walkie-talkie reached Roman, who couldn't believe it was a trap. At that moment, another piece of bad news came. Murphy, leading a large group of talkers, had arrived at the gates of Elura. Upon arrival, Roman tried to appear calm, claiming his guards would soon return and hoping Murphy would wisely leave. Just then, Roberta and her group took control of the remaining guards inside the base and forced Roman to surrender. Seeing the situation turn, Pandora fired a bluff shot and then fled with Roman. Roberta and George immediately gave chase. However, Pandora and Roman split up upon entering a building. George went after Roman, while Roberta pursued Pandora. Pandora, now devoid of her previous arrogance, scurried away like a rat in the street, pursued by Roberta. Unfortunately, Roberta quickly lost her trail, but then, Roberta unexpectedly encountered her former lover, Cooper, at a corner. Stunned, she was at a loss for words. As Pandora ran past them, Roberta told Cooper they would talk later, but Cooper insisted he had something important to tell her. That's when Murphy emerged. Roberta handed Cooper over to Murphy and quickly resumed her chase after Pandora. Murphy, seeing the man who once wanted him dead, was furious.
You know, she may be glad you're alive. Me? Not so much.
Roberta soon reached the end of a corridor, where she encountered George, who was hunting Roman. George revealed Roman was hiding inside. They cautiously stormed in. Roman, aware of Roberta and George's approach, welcomed them to the heart of Elura. In front of Roman is a chemical pool where the lithium blocks are stored, and where all of Elura's energy comes from. Roman claimed everything he did was to ensure humanity could survive safely. As for the talkers, if resources ever ran out, they would surely revert to bloodthirsty monsters again. George strongly disagreed, arguing that talkers, once human, deserved to live. Are you going to eliminate all talkers just because of your personal opinion? Roman, even at this juncture, stood by his views, asserting that reform inevitably requires sacrifices, and those sacrificed were a group of heartless monsters. Then George asked about his beloved Pandora, to which Roman coldly replied that Pandora was merely a monster being used, no different in his eyes than a talking doll or any other talker.
We're gonna let everybody know how you were behind all the attacks. No one would believe you.
Seeing the right moment, Roberta pulled out a drone. Turns out, their entire conversation had been recorded by a drone brought by Citizen Z from Hackertown and was live-streamed to every corner of Elura. Roman was now utterly disgraced. Pandora, upon hearing Roman call her a tool, rushed over in fury. Seeing this, Roman was completely panicked and tried his best to soothe Pandora's emotions. Roberta and George suddenly became spectators to the drama. At this point, Roman's explanations were feeble and powerless. He had always believed that his actions were for the better survival of humanity.
Get rid of the talkers just because they're inconvenient, or mercy them just because they're dead.
The talkers are rotting bags of putrefied meat, and we must cleanse them from society before they drag us all down to their level.
Roman's words once again infuriated Pandora. Then, Pandora pulled out a small knife and pressed it against Roman's vitals. She had devoted herself entirely to working for Roman, even sacrificing her body, only to be treated as a monster by him in the end. This thrilling scene was being live-streamed by Citizen Z, but the drone was too close, and an enraged Pandora directly knocked it down into the chemical pool. Pandora felt that merely killing Roman wasn't enough, so she directly destroyed his life's work, causing the chemical pool to start boiling. Seeing this, Roman panicked. If the lithium blocks overheated, it would cause a severe explosion, killing everyone in Elura. So, he sought Roberta's help to inject coolant into the chemical pool. Knowing the gravity of the situation, Roberta had to trust him for once. Then, only George and Pandora were left on the scene. With their confrontation imminent, George first dodged a knife with a slide tackle, then turned around to counterattack. She easily knocked the knife from Pandora's hand. Then George swiftly landed a punch, knocking off Pandora's mask. Beneath the mask was such an ugly face. It was hard to imagine how Roman could stand it. Then Pandora got up again and started fighting with George. In a burst of strength, George threw Pandora into the chemical pool. In just a few seconds, Pandora was corroded to nothing but white bones. Meanwhile, with Roberta's help, Roman successfully injected the coolant, and the machinery deactivated the alarm. But at that moment, Roman snatched the pistol from her. He was very angry with Roberta for ruining everything, and then he shot Roberta several times. Unexpectedly, Roberta was unharmed, shocking Roman on the spot. George quickly arrived and subdued Roman. Roberta, looking at the bullet holes in disbelief, fainted the next second. When Roberta woke up again, she found herself in a room. Cooper came in and revealed the whole truth to Roberta. After finding you outside the farm, although I operated on you in time, you died from excessive blood loss and became a talker, perhaps because of the black rainbow. You're different from other talkers and resemble a normal human more. I didn't want you to go because I was protecting you, fearing you'd be experimented on in the labs. Then Cooper sincerely apologized, hoping for Roberta's forgiveness. Roberta felt relieved upon hearing this. No matter what identity she lives under, as long as she is happy, that's all that matters. Then, she and Cooper renewed their relationship. On the other side, with the support of humans and talkers, George became the new leader of America. This signified that talkers could live together with humans. Under George's leadership, it's believed that humans and talkers can coexist peacefully. In the end, everyone handed son May's brain to Murphy. Murphy then sat alone on the lawn, savoring it. After eating, he revealed a meaningful smile. Will Murphy choose to save all of humanity, or will he establish his own zombies kingdom again? This concludes Z Nation. Thank you all for your support. I will continue to bring you good works in the future.